everyone. Thanks for checking into the Pit Stop. This is our recap for Amazing Race 37, Episode 2, Very Strong Warrior Energy. I'm James, and sadly, Cayla cannot make it tonight, but I'm thankfully joined by two very special guests. And to not keep them waiting backstage any longer, I would love to introduce Dr. Maya from Amazing Race Season 25. And of course, for the first time on the Pit Stop, James Earl from Season 27. Hey, y'all.
Hello.
So happy to have you join for this recap. I can't wait to hear your thoughts. But first, I would love to just get a little update as to what you've been up to since the race. Maya, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so since race, or since maybe last time I was on here, I have been still doing ice cream. Ice cream is still my life. I love it. I love it. I love it. And I've been traveling a lot, spending majority of my time in Australia, in Melbourne, Australia. Hi to all the Aussies out there. And yeah, I've been absolutely loving it. Went to a few months ago, spent some time in Hong Kong. Actually, was at the stairs where the Buddha statue is. We're in the first episode of this season, and spent some time in Seoul, spent some time in Hanoi, Vietnam. So yeah, just been loving my life and traveling the world and making ice cream.
All over, and it was so great to watch Survivor with you last night. And I've been
Yes.
Survivor as well.
Yes.
I'm a little behind on that one, so no spoilers on that front.
Yes, no spoilers. But you need to watch it. No spoilers. Lips are sealed.
Yes.
James and I hung out last night because I'm in LA. Yes, I was gripping his arm and leg. Yes.
Cool. That's makes me so excited. Maybe I'll do that right after this.
Perfect.
You gotta watch.
And James Earl, this is your first time on our recap. It's so great we were talking before we went live that this is really kind of our first time really
interacting at all.
It's crazy. I did AfterBuzz for your season, and we never connected then, but we've DM'd a few times.
We've messaged like back and forth, but I'm truly think this is the first time we've ever like talked face to face for whatever this is worth.
So happy for you to join. What have you been up to since your season of the race?
So not nearly as interesting as Maya, but so my race was actually a decade ago now, which is insane to think. But I finished my residency, which is what you do after you graduate med school, and then I've been working as a doctor in the ER since then. For the past few years, what I've been doing is just traveling around the U.S. doing fulls and half marathons in like different countries, which has been a blast. I've gone to like Chicago, Seattle, Oklahoma City. I've done one in Austin. I've just been having a lot of fun traveling doing that.
Wow. Well,
congrats. That's awesome.
We're all traveling, actively, always on the move.
I think being on the race gives you that itch to be like, I need to go do something.
It's so true.
Definitely.
The bug, you can't not travel.
Agree.
Well, I cannot wait to discuss this episode. I feel like this season is already off to a very strong start. Last week, we kind of talked about it with Floyd and with Brooke, just how this feels a little bit more of like an old school Amazing Race. It's like everything that fans have been talking about for years. It's like they finally got the formula down, in my opinion. What are your thoughts already about this season? I know we're only 2 episodes in.
So I think there were some really competitive teams this season that you wouldn't think are competitive. Like Scott and Lori come to mind with that, which I love when a team surprises me. But I think getting back to the airport drama, the booking the flights drama, like trying to get on a different flight, that had been so suppressed for years that it's nice to see it come back. I mean, truly, I think that had been suppressed since Maya's season until now.
Yeah, after us, it wasn't a thing really.
No, for us, it was like very strict, like this is what you're going to be doing.
Yeah. Love the fight drama as well. That to me separates. And love, for instance, seeing Pop and Jeff along with the mom and daughter, I don't remember everyone's names, call and make sure they got on that earlier flight. Like that's race for you right there. That's down to the nitty gritty of how race sort of used to be. So agree with both of you, James and James Earl, and getting back to the old school way of racing. I am super in love with this season. I'll admit, wasn't like really feeling 14 teams in the beginning. I'm like, that's just a lot. I know we got an hour and a half, but that's a lot of teams to be able to keep up with and watch. So now we're down to where we were. At least I know my season was 11 teams of two.
Yeah.
So we're down to that again, which makes me feel a little bit like more at ease. But I also like the fact that they're throwing in all of these kind of, what we could consider extra, but they've got this intersection, this leg, and it's like, how do you what do you guys think about that? I would love to learn, see when we get there. But I like it. It throws it for a loop in a way that is kind of unexpected than just sort of you're just racing. So I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
And y'all being Survivor fans, I said last week it's giving Survivor Ghost Island in a way where it's Amazing Race Ghost Island, as all these twists and surprises from seasons past are now here on season 37. And I'm thoroughly enjoying it. And granted, I mean, now that we have hour and a half episodes, you've got to fill it up somehow. So I
Yep.
do like that these twists are making a comeback.
Yes.
But I don't feel like the
Agreed.
twists are so overwhelming either. Like
No.
sometimes the twist
No.
can overwhelm a show, and it's not.
Right. No. But it's real, and it affected this leg. Like it's real. I don't know if intersection is my favorite twist of all the twists, but
I would hate to live through
is
that
what it-
one, because I'd be the team that's like, we can't pair with them, or I'm afraid people would be like, you can't pair with us too.
Jack and Carson say, hey, and then they also say, oh my gosh, so happy to see James Earl and Maya. You all are iconic. And then Ricky and
thank you,
Cesar are
guys.
here as well. Hey, y'all, thanks for watching. So at the start of this episode, we find out that teams are going to be flying from Hong Kong to Osaka, Japan. And we hear Phil say it's a city that combines cutting edge technology with its rich history, like this 400-year-old canal that Phil was riding in on. I got a little laugh out of that. And of course, he's plugging that this is going to be an Expedia-inspired adventure, that the teams are taking part in a very traditional and authentic experiences found through the Expedia app. We love a little bit of a little brand plug-in. I do miss the Travelocity roaming gnome, though.
I thought they were going to bring it back. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
I truly thought they were going to bring it back.
I miss that little gnome.
Yes. So cute, adorable. Just don't name it.
Yeah, just don't name it. Will and I learned that the hard way on our season. They were not happy we named it. And the teams are departing in order as they checked in from last week's pit stop. And as they depart from the pit start, they're given a clue to take them to a travel agency where they can book their flights to Osaka. Again, it's giving very old school Amazing Race. On our season, we would be told to go to the travel agency, but everyone ended up on the same flight. So I love that we're seeing these different separations and hearing people's thought process when it comes to booking their flights. And there was one team in particular that really stuck out to me that I consider to be kind of a power move. And that was Alyssa and Josiah. And I want to play that clip and we'll discuss what you guys think.
What is the direct flight to Osaka?
Yeah, arrival 6:55.
I think that takes a lot of risk out because then we're not risking anything with the layover.
I agree. Can we book this flight?
Yeah.
As we know, Jack and Carson, Mark and Brett, and Ernest and Bridget booked a connecting flight through Taipei to Osaka, which I do think there's a lot of risk in doing that. But Alyssa and Josiah, on the other side of it, they don't want to take that risk. They want a direct flight. So Maya, James Earl, what would you do in this situation? And who do you think made the better call?
Oh, so my personal preference with these flights is like as direct as possible personally, even if it's a little more 30 minutes, because there's so many things that can go wrong when you have two-step processes. And that's just my mind in general. But, you never know what's going to be right in the situation until the situation is done. So I've always said the race is like 90% skill, 10% luck. And that's that 10% luck proponent to it. And it just is like, you don't know who's going to be right until the end is done.
I would agree.
Loved this scene because for me, like when Amy and I raced, part of our strength was our mental strength. And this is a mental strength move in my eyes, of being able to take a step back, analyze the situation, and evaluate it to the best of their ability and what they thought was proper. And who knows, that flight could have gotten delayed. I mean, you never know, things happen. But I like it because it shows me that they're looking at this very strategically and not just, oh, we want to get on the fastest, flights, etc. Because the direct flight, if you end up with a connecting and that gets delayed, you've got now two chances of a delay. So I like the move. um would Amy and I have done that? I hope so. It's been 11 years, but I hope so.
Yeah, I think it's so risky, but as long as you're with other teams, I kind of am like, maybe that risk would have been worth it. But I do think Alyssa and Josiah made the right call in doing just a direct flight because there's just so many variables at play. Even when the race isn't going on, if you're just traveling as a traveler, there are so many things that could go wrong in terms of delays and cancellations. But I just love them really kind of weighing out the pros and cons and kind of seeing their thought process in booking. And I also loved the drama of how many teams ended up going to the wrong travel agent.
That's why I love little things like this, though, is because it creates opportunity for mistakes and it creates separation. Like those little things add so much depth to this leg and to all of the legs when they do it.
And that's why it felt like old school Amazing Race to me. I'm like the first 20 minutes, I'm pretty sure it was 20 minutes of this episode, and just all the airport and the flight booking drama was like perfection. I was like, this is what we've been on for seasons.
Yes.
And the next power move, and Maya, you did already touch on this a little bit, but I want to play the clip to give them their props, was again, Melinda and Erica in Pops and
The
Jeff.
Amazing Race isn't just about athleticism. It's a lot about strategy, making the right decisions. Lori and Scott, Bernie and Kerrigan decided to walk away, and Jeff and I just stayed there and kept brainstorming, and we're like, we're gonna find a yes somehow.
And it paid off because instead of being on that last flight with Scott and Lori and Bernie and Kerrigan, they got onto that second flight, which I felt like was going to be a big lead because of all the different flight arrival times. I felt like flight 3 was going to be a little over an hour behind the first flight, which is a huge lead.
Yeah. It doesn't sound like a lot, but once you're once you've done the race, you realize that is insane. Like you might as well check your bags. Like, good Lord.
Yeah. An hour would make me extremely nervous of like, oh my gosh, we are an hour behind. Like we have a lot.
15 minutes made me nervous. Like when we're in the second group, 15 minutes behind, I was like, yo, we're gonna have to book it.
We have a lot to catch up because you don't know what's ahead. You don't know that it could be sort of a bunching point. And did they already know that the intersection was the next? They didn't know that yet, right? So at that point, you didn't even know. So yeah, so power move, loved it. I love it when racers approach it sort of from a mental standpoint, because at the end of the day, if you can get past the mental fatigue of it all and be able to really push through, I believe that teams can stand above the rest because they're exhausted right now. Who knows how much sleep they've really had. They're jet lagged, but not really because they don't know what time zones their bodies are really on. But it's a lot.
Yeah.
So
I love lead 2 as well. Like I'm at lead 10's coming up. Like it gets worse.
Oh, way worse. But I love it.
100%. The one thing that I did not like, and I'm sorry, Bernie and Kerrigan, like I'm gonna have to hate a little bit on you. From when you get on the mat and rip that clue until you're at the pit stop, you need to be always on. You need to be trying to find computers, searching the areas that you're going to next. You need to be trying to find different locations. Like, what's the traffic like at this time of the day? Like, you've got to be on. For the time to chill down, calm down is once you're at the pit stop, you're back in the hotel. Then you get 12 hours to just do nothing. But I hated the oh, well, we got hours. Let's just go sit at the terminal. And maybe they did other stuff. The TV made it look like they didn't.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Yeah. I mean, anytime we knew we had a long period of time between the pit start and our flight departing, Will and I would find a hotel near the airport and use the business center to do as much research as we could. And if a printer was available, we would print off directions. Granted, in this day and age, there's always a cell phone on a taxi to use GPS, but we wanted to just make sure we had everything available to us so that we felt confident. So yeah, I agree. I do think that was a rookie mistake on Bernie and Kerrigan's part. And to some extent, even Scott and Lori's. I mean, I was shocked Scott and Lori didn't really go the extra mile to try to get on a different flight. So same page.
Yeah, agree. And I think that Bernie and Kerrigan are letting their emotions get the best of them, as we saw. And they are, I mean, hopefully next legs, they are able to put their differences aside and treat this as a business and race, because they can be a strong female team. Amy and I are still the reigning female team, and it's been 11 years, and it's kind of wild. And we
We
want to
tried in
see
3
a
of
strong
36,
female.
right?
Yeah, yeah, it's wild. But the emotions have to be put aside. And I agree. Even on the airplanes, Amy and I were sitting next to people, asking them certain words in the native language, or what, like, using like whatever we could use to gain, we were doing it. And to see people kind of just sit back and relax, it's like, oh, don't forget you're racing and there's teams hours ahead of you right now. So we'll see how that might pick up as we go along in the season.
Yeah, because I think they have a lot of potential, Bernie and
For
Kerrigan.
sure.
And they
Both of the teams.
yeah, and they clearly know each other very well because I'm pretty sure they said this in the episodes, like you can be that comfortable with someone and because you love them so much, where you can kind of have that kind of back and forth.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the fire that they're bringing, because I feel like we've missed those types of teams that have conflict. And then again, it's the recovery. How do you bounce back from that?
Gotta bounce back.
So another thing I'm loving about the editing of this season is just the really amazing graphics that the editing team is putting together, like the different flights. So flight 1 was Carson, Jack, Mark and Brett, Ernest and Bridget. Flight 2, Pops and Jeff, Nick and Mike, Alyssa, Josiah, Melinda and Erica, Courtney and Jasmine, Han and Holden, and Jonathan and Anna. And then flight 3 was Bernie and Kerrigan and Scott and Lori. Here's the graphic. This is the graphic I was fawning over. I was like, this is gorgeous. I love the reference of it all. So now going into Osaka how the teams are going to arrive. So again, flight 3 said arrival at 7:55 a.m. into Osaka. And then flight 1, I'll play it again, was 6:05. So that is insane.
2 hours.
How much of a lead that is over the last flight. And we'll talk about this as we continue. But just the bounce back that Scott and Lori and Bernie and Kerrigan were able to have this lag, despite how much time behind they were from everyone, was honestly kind of shocking. And
it was amazing.
I messaged Scott on the Tar Hub Discord just asking him, like, how is that possible? Because I immediately thought like the two of you would be fighting for last place. Realistically, historically speaking, that's what would happen on the race. And he was so generous to provide this breakdown, which if you want to know more, he's going to put their recap up on Lori's YouTube channel and talk about this more in depth. But it was just a visual of when the teams and the flights actually arrived into Osaka. And from what it looks like, the first flight got in at 6:09. The second flight got in, the first flight got in at 5:49 a.m. The second
even earlier.
9 a.m. And then the third flight actually got in at 7:24 a.m. So still like an hour and a half.
It's still a distance, yeah.
That's insane still, that they've made up that much time. But
that next challenge, that...
Well, I have thoughts about Scott. I have major thoughts about Scott because like he is... We'll get there. Well,
James Earl, he's in the chat right now saying you don't know how important sleep is for Lori. An hour and 55 minutes, baby. Thanks.
They're
Scott,
good thoughts, but I have thoughts.
Yeah, thank you for the intel on the flights, because I was honestly just impressed at how I just assumed it was one of you two were going to be goners this episode. This brings us to the point of the intersection being reintroduced, and I had to go back and look. It has not been on the show since season 16. So it's been 21 seasons since we've had the intersection. It also appeared in Amazing Race season 6, season 10, and the first All-Star. So Love that it's back. We find out that teams, of course, with the intersection and how it works, they have to work with another team and it has to be mutually agreed upon. So as we've seen in previous seasons, a team could be waiting there and you show up and you might be like, no, I'm not going to work with this team. No, thank you. But I do have some thoughts on the intersection, but I would love to know what y'all think about this twist.
I would have loved it to be later in the season when teams know each other more.
Mhm.
Agreed.
Personally, I think we would have seen
yeah.
more dynamics there of like, oh, actually, we actually can't. But it was like, oh, the first two teams here are gonna go. So it's kind of like process of elimination. I'm waiting for a team. The next team that comes is my team. I would have loved to see a little bit of, drama there. There was no drama. Would have been great to see it. Also, don't love the way the intersection works in the sense that, if Brett and Mark would have, somehow like, I would have felt really awful if like clearly he's getting it, but the father and daughter weren't able to get, you know what I mean? I would have felt awful if they went home because of someone else's mistake, not a taxi driver, not, but because of this sort of challenge. So I'm hit or miss with it, but definitely would have liked to see it further in the season than in the second episode.
I would agree.
Yeah, it's a gamble that I don't know if the payoff is worth it within the race context, if that makes sense. Especially like you said, the teams just don't know each other. Because I mean, honestly, if I think back to our lead too, like you barely knew placements from the first lead because it's just there's so many teams, and they even have more teams to deal with. Plus, the teams were split up half and half. So like, how do you know if those even compare? So like, there's a lot about it.
I would agree with what you were saying, just about how it needed to be later in the season. And I love when we see some strategic thinking from the teams. And I think with the intersection being later in the show, like you said, you see the teams actually have to make the choice of like, is this a team I really want to work with? What we saw play out with this, because it's only leg 2, is that any team that showed up with another team was naturally like, let's work together. But if later in the season, you're going to know everyone's kind of average placement, how they work together, what their weaknesses are. It would have been fun to see a team have to sit there and wait for a team that was actually willing to work with them. That's the drama I wanted to see play out. I did come to learn when I interviewed Ernest and Bridget today, in the episode, we hear Mark say, when they walked up to the intersection and then Carson and Jack come up shortly behind, we all agreed that whoever the first two teams were, that's how it would be. At that point, Ernest and Bridget apparently thought that they were third. They had already thought Mark and Brett and Jack and Carson got there and were already on their way. So they were shook when Mark and Brett showed up because they were like, oh, we're actually the first two teams. This was like an agreement and a pact that they had talked about on the plane over. And what's even crazier is they didn't know that the intersection was coming. But this is a true testament to how much of fans these three teams are, because they knew this was a season of surprises, as Phil has already plugged, that they were trying to weigh out all the possible surprises or outcomes that they could come across in Osaka. And the intersection was something they had discussed. So they already kind of went into this leg with a game plan, which I thought was so impressive.
Can I say one thing, though? The producers were so cruel to make this intersection a roadblock, because I personally think the roadblocks are the most stressful part of the race. Oh, right. And then on leg 2, you're going to do an intersection roadblock. God bless these teams.
Oh, right. Oh my God. Because in the past, I mean, once the first season the intersection was introduced, it was just like a route info that they had to do together. The next 2 were detours. And then in season 16, it was a roadblock. I do think the intersection works better as a detour task because it forces actually all 4 of them to work together. With this, it's just 2. And sure, it makes sense, but I would like to see the other teams be utilized in the intersection, or the other individuals in this intersection have to work together too, because we only saw 2 of them rather than all 4 of them. if that makes
I
sense.
kind of like the stress of seeing the other team member, like say one of the other team members was like extremely musically talented or whatever, and like that sort of drama aspect of it. Like
Oh yeah.
I like
On the
that. Like
couch, I love it. I just know how they
I
feel in
like
that
it,
moment, and I hate it.
experiencing it too. I love it. I love the thrill of it. But I mean, I see what you all are saying, but I also like the other aspect of it. But definitely agree should have been further in the season. And would have still, even not further, I would have still liked for people to be like, oh no, I'm waiting for such and such to arrive. But that's also a risk because you never want to wait. You
And
don't
what
want to wait. It's the
the
race.
real dad would be if you waited and then the next team was like, no, I'm going with them. That's
Right.
the real dad.
I
Right.
wanted some drama.
That's what I wanted to see. Zach and Carson said in the chat, we felt intersection had to be it when there were an even number of teams. So it was T when we were right.
Very nice, very nice. Congrats on that one.
And then Mark says Taipei definitely gave us so much time to ponder. So love the forward thinking. And as we know with this intersection, it was a roadblock. Who wants to beat the competition? Two people from two different teams had to work together to complete this roadblock. And in order to complete it, they had to learn and perform a very complicated, as we saw, percussion pattern. What were your thoughts on this roadblock?
Mama, I would have crushed this. I did band through college. I was drum major in a collegiate band, and I did like all of them. I would have chewed this up.
I loved it because it wasn't easy. I mean, I know Scott and Bernie got on the first try, I believe, but or no, who Scott
Yeah.
and
It was Scott and Bernie.
Yeah.
Bernie, yeah, on the first try. So I loved how long it took some of the other teams. And I love that it was a real challenge. And yeah, if some people are musically gifted, but you still have the pressure and the nerves and everyone waiting, and only one team could go at once. I also like that because it forced people to really have to try to get it right. Otherwise, you have to wait. And I like that. I mean, maybe not as a racer, as like someone actually racing, but I like being able to see that sort of that intensity of it all. So I loved it. And I love the cultural aspect that it brought as well. And I love that people are keeping the items that they're wearing. They didn't keep the sumo stuff, but I like that people kept the hat that they had in Hong Kong. And I saw people run off with the little kind of kimono, I don't know whatever they were wearing in there as well. So I liked it.
Yeah, I love bunch points on the race because that's when the pressure really starts to set in, when everyone's just kind of in the same area and everyone's doing the same task. And this was actually one of my favorite quotes of the episode that I'll play that kind of described the chaos of this roadblock.
The practice area was chaotic. It was like what I imagined Scott and Lori's home to be like. It's dozens of children banging on bing bongo drums. I'm like, oh my God.
So funny. And I want to speak about Scott and Lori, actually. And Maya, you pointed out that Scott and Bernie got it on their first try. But I do have some gripe with this. And this is not against Scott and this is not against Bernie. But the receipts are there. As a viewer, I was actually surprised that they got it on their first attempt. I might be a little harsh, and good thing I wasn't judging this roadblock, but I don't think that they deserve to get it on their first attempt. And here's why. I have a clip. Watch closely every team and what they do in the final few beats, and then tell me if you see what I see. Here's the roadblock judging. Scott didn't do the ha. And they were off by a couple of
It was a little
beats.
off.
It was definitely off. So nothing against Scott and Bernie. I mean, clearly they saw something there. The judges did that we don't see as a viewer, but as a viewer, I was a little surprised that they got it on the first attempt.
Good catch. Good catch.
And with that hard of a roadblock, no offense, nobody should have gotten it on their first attempt.
But that goes to show you too that confidence with these performance scenes are key. Like Krista DeBano on my season was the pro of this. Like she could convince any judge to differ any clue like immediately. Like you just have to sell it. And this is where I want to start my thesis on Scott during this episode is when he was backstage and he was like, listen, I'm just going to take the dad role. I'm just going to keep this cool, calm, collected. I know what this is. That is some like confident, like daddy stuff that got him through this lead from last to second place. And like he knows what he is doing on this race. And it's moments like that. But like he's living in the chaos, being able to control the chaos and just work through it. And it's so different than being just cocky during the race. And it's so subtle, but it's so different.
I loved it. I loved seeing them race this leg, especially come back from second where we thought they were just chilling in an airport and like, what are you doing? Like literally yelling, like, what are you doing? And then for them to be able to, you know, basically crush it. But like James Earl said, like you were in band for how long? Like you would have crushed it.
Yeah. But he knew what to do when he got in there.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Maybe I'm being a little bit of a harsh critic and it not taking away because I thought.
No, you're right.
You're right.
Scott was a great partner to have. He clearly knew his shit.
Bernie needed that partner because he just had a chaotic situation. Agreed.
Yes. I just thought first attempt was a little bit of a stretch.
And I feel you on that, but I still think it was the performance. I'm telling you, like you can perform your way through mistakes.
We talk about this, and you even saw it last week in the singing part.
Yes,
sometimes it was a little lax in the judging, and sometimes it was very harsh. But it really is, and I feel like I just remember Bertram at one of our tasks where we had to perform. He wanted more out of us. He was like, where's the show? And we were like, oh, okay, so you really want us to go big. So we went all out. And that was really what they want. They want us to look like fools and have fun while doing it, even if we're not proficient at what we're doing. That's really 100%. What it is. So you're right. It's the performance of it all. That is what's being judged.
Seriously, at least did the same thing for us in Argentina. We had to do this like Argentina dance on the wall, and she's like, "I need this to be sexy from everybody." And I was like, "I'll be the sexiest little dancer you want to see." And I got it immediately.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Well, a team that didn't get it immediately, sad to say, was Ernest and Mark, and my heart was breaking for these two. I mean, I thought Mark handled this with such grace. And I really loved he did share that he can't hide what's on his face. And he just felt so hopeless and bad, but he wasn't mad at Ernest. And I do appreciate that he said that. Because again, you guys are a team, you have to work together. And the hard part of this was you don't really know them. It's so new it's so fresh into the race that he didn't really know how to give Ernest the support that Ernest needed because Ernest was so in his head. You could just see him overthinking it and it just was flustering him. So it was really sad and hard to watch, but I loved at the end that instead of being frustrated, they hugged it out and they went on their way. What did you guys think about watching Mark and Ernest?
No, you can go first because I have some thoughts.
I felt really bad for both of them, honestly. I mean, Ernest just, again, couldn't get, like you said, couldn't get it out of his head, couldn't get it. And Mark got it. Like second, third, fourth, whichever one it was, he got it. And that for me was the point where I was like, oh, this intersection sort of thing is, it's rough because they should have been gone. He got it. But again, it's one of those things like if they would have known teams better, they could have assessed and kind of figured out, all right, maybe we don't want to go with ABC, want to go with XYZ instead. But they didn't have that opportunity. They just went with whoever was there next. So it was rough, but I mean, I appreciate the emotional aspect of it. I think sometimes race misses the emotional toll that it takes on us as racers. So I loved seeing that aspect of it and then being able to share in that moment. But we all know that was grueling. That was rough.
Yeah.
Love you, Ernest, but that was rough.
Yeah.
I will say my mom called me. What day did this come out? Wednesday, today's Thursday. She told me this morning. because this moment like brought her back flashbacks to France, and like this moment broke my mom's heart because my mom knew what Ernest was feeling in this moment, and she like apologized to me all again about France, and I was like, listen, like this is 10 years ago at this point, but she says it's so hard to be failing in front of your child who's supposed to be your partner in this race, and you're the holdup for why y'all can't progress. And she had a little bit of a come apart because it just reminded her of that. So I felt for them in this team in this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just really broke my heart. And I agree with what you said, Maya. That's the hard part about this intersection. But also, I want to point out, and this is why sometimes being first or like leading in a leg can work against you. They made the decision to work together, but on the next partnership of Carson and Jack and Jonathan and Anna, Carson points out that he can hear the drums.
You can hear the drums.
And so they knew that it was going to be something music related. So from that information, they were able to pick who they felt were going to be the best people for this roadblock. Whereas Mark and Brett and Ernest and Bridget didn't have that advantage. So as much as it's fun to be first, it can also be a disadvantage when you get to a task on The Amazing Race because of your surroundings and not having as much information as another team would have had.
And also, I don't know if you all thought about like, or ask the teams that are here, like, who can you beat in a foot race? No offense, but Mark and really, I'm not beating them in a foot race. Like, I don't necessarily want to go with a pair with them because at the end of the day, it's the two last teams that have to. So I thought about that. Amy and I thought about that. We never did an intersection, but kind of thought about like who's left. Like, can we beat them? You know what I mean? Like, so I thought about that in this intersection. I know it was not the last challenge, but still, if it is the last challenge, could that be part of the assessment that teams would make? And to me, that's that mental thinking that I love about race that you don't always get on camera, but I love it about the race so much. I don't think teams thought about that.
Well, it's really early, and these teams are all kind of fresh, and I just realized I'm sitting here with two winners, which is wonderful. I'm fifth place over here. But as you get later in the race, I think you think about those things.
Right.
Maybe it's too. Okay, you're right. Maybe it is too early.
There's like there was 14 teams last week. You felt like you got a lot of buffer. There's 12 now, still got a ton. When you start getting to like 7, 6, 5, like that stress is hard.
Yeah, not a lot of wiggle room. Yeah.
Well, great roadblock overall, especially because of how many teams were tripped up and it made a bunching point in the leg. Because again, I thought Scott and Lori and Bernie and Kerrigan were screwed being on that last flight, but I loved how much time they were able to make up because of this roadblock. It made for a really unpredictable leg because of that. After the roadblock, they got their route info where they had to make their way on foot to a bridge nearby, which was their clue to the detour, which was Mochi or Mawashi. In Mochi, they had to pulverize some steamed rice into a sticky dough and then pound out enough to make 10 mochi balls. In Mawashi, teams had to wrap each other in mawashi, which is the traditional loincloth sumo wrestlers wear, in order to receive their next clue. I mean, I do appreciate this whole like Expedia plug because the entire time I was thinking to myself, well, if I go to Osaka, I want to do one of these things. Like these both look like a lot of fun. It was a really great detour. Which side of the detour do you think you would have taken and why?
So me and Mom always avoided the physical. So I think it depends on what the clue said. But if it was like wrestling versus make some candy, Mom and I were going to make the candy. Like we actively tried to avoid physical.
I mean, Amy and I are food scientists. We would have definitely done mochi. Like, I would have been like, oh my God, we're doing mochi. Like, I was just always happy about anything on the race. So definitely would have done mochi. And I would have eaten the mochi. I'm like, I hope they took some and ate it. Like, I would have eaten it. Definitely would have done mochi. Yeah, for sure.
I would agree. I think mochi would have been the one Will and I would have done. And when I spoke with Bridget and Ernest earlier today, she had told me that they initially wanted to do mochi, but because they were so far behind, they ended up doing Mawashi because somewhere, I don't know if it must have been in the additional info, it said that there were only a limited amount of spots. So rather than risk it and going there first, they just went to the other one because it wasn't a limited amount of spots, which I thought was pretty smart on their part to like do that and then process like, oh, well, this could be risky because we're so far behind. But now she's like,
Which one was closer?
they were kind of next to each other. If I'm
Were
not
they?
mistaken, I don't know if the edit made it seem that way, but I thought that they were relatively in the same vicinity.
Yeah, didn't the mother and daughter switch because they were going to do this one, but
They
they saw
weren't
this
gonna
team, so they just went
do-
there.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, she said hindsight's 2020, and that looking back on it, they should have done Mochi, but it is what it is. Carson and Jack just confirmed they were in the same little athletic park.
I would say that little building looked the same.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Which also made sense now why that team was talking about switching, because they talked about switching deep into the detour. And at first I was like, oh, that's a bad mistake. But if it's in the same building, maybe I'll give that a pass.
You just go across the way. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Because usually I'm like so anti-switching detour because it could cost me so much time. But I remember in season 33, there was one detour where someone switched, and I was like, it made sense because they were literally next to each other. So yeah, in this case, it doesn't hurt to at least switch it up if you can.
Yeah.
But the Mawashi part of this detour seemed to trip up again a lot of teams because of the detailing and how that Mawashi was folded and wrapped. But it brought a lot of funny moments in the episode for me, and it was this moment in particular.
We got some issues. Gays know how to drape. Yes.
Gays know how to drape. So
with that little sachet with it too. That's everything.
It was perfect. Scott just said in the chat, I heard that one group did leave the Mawashi to go check out the mochi balls, and they didn't show it.
Oh, interesting.
Love.
Not going to drop the names. Give us those receipts.
You heard which team was it, Scott?
Well, for the Mochi side, it was Pops and Jeff, Courtney and Jasmine, Erica, Melinda, and Mawashi side was Jonathan and Anna, Carson and Jack, Josiah and Alyssa, Mike and Nick, Scott and Lori, Bernie and Kerrigan, Mark and Brett, Han and Holden, and Bridget and Ernest. So I want to talk about Han and Holden. I do feel like they're kind of getting a little under edited, but I'm liking kind of this like frantic energy that Han brings. And then Holden's like, Han, get it together. And they're what Han said about how we don't want Han and Holden to get in Han and Holden's own way. And I think we started to see that a little bit. They let their taxi go at the tower. So a lot of teams passed them while they had to find another taxi. And then same thing with this detour. They seem to struggle a lot with getting the actual detail down from what the example was showing. So I'll be curious with Han and Holden how they start to find their momentum. Because right now it's that learning curve in the race where you're trying to find your footing and also kind of understand how your teammate's going to be. But there's something about Han and Holden that I'm intrigued, and I look forward to seeing how it pans out for the two of them.
They're either the team that like they're about to be out or they're going to make it forever. Like that type of chaotic energy, it's either like early out or the end. There's like no middle ground with that.
Right. Yeah. Either going to work in their favor or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Mark confirmed in the chat, Nick and Mike saw Mochi and the 100 hammer throws and thought it was too much. So they went to Mawashi. And then Scott validates, yeah, that is what I heard. So yeah. They probably would have showed it if it would have made like some difference. If it would have made a difference.
Yeah. Or if they even started Mochi or something. You know what I mean? Like they would have shown some part of it if it made any sense.
Agreed. Well, this brings us to our pit stop, which is the Tahota Pagoda. And in first place, Jonathan and Anna. And I thought the prize that they received of like a guided hike of Mount Kilimanjaro was one of the better prizes in the past couple of seasons. I was so jealous. Scott and Lori in second place, Alyssa and Josiah in third, Carson and Jack in fourth, Melinda and Erica in fifth, Bernie and Kerrigan sixth, Pops and Jeff seventh, Courtney and Jasmine eighth, Brett and Mark ninth, Nick and Mike 10th, Han and Holden 11th, and sadly we say goodbye to Ernest and Bridget. It was unfortunate to see because they started off so strong. I feel like even last leg, they were a really great team. They got in the top 3. Then this start of the leg, they were on that first flight. They get to Osaka first. They get to the intersection clue box first. Like they were kind of the front runners to lead the charge. And so to see them go from first all the way to last, it broke my heart a little bit.
Yeah, it's hard. No, that's hard. It's hard to see, especially like you said, they're starting off so strong. But it just goes to show you, you just never know when you can go from first to last and last to first. I mean, it's swapped today basically,
Right.
or sorry, in yesterday's episode, and it just goes to show you, you never stop, you never quit, you never give up, because you never know what's ahead of you, you never know what's behind you. So definitely hard to see. Love getting to know both of them. Love the relationship. Really love how the race is diving deeper into life outside of the race. I
Right.
appreciate and learning about people more. But it was very, very, very sad to see them leave.
Yeah, I felt like what they said at the pit stop was very beautiful. It was a very tender moment. And then when I interviewed them, what Ernest had to say about Bridget was just the sweetest. He was like, I have Wonder Woman for a daughter. And how many dads get to say that? And he was like, her cape really came out on this leg. And I just feel like being able to walk away with that perspective and that understanding in your relationship, and then it translating to real life post race, like that in itself made the whole experience worth it for these two.
Awesome.
So I was bummed that they were gone way too soon. And then Carson Jack, they are some of the most genuinely kind people ever.
Well, don't tell us that. Tell us they're like mean people so we feel less bad.
Mark said Bridget and Ernest are one of a kind. Yeah, definitely sad to see them go. Before we talk about what might be coming in next week's episode, who do you feel like was the standout team this episode to you? What teams in general might be standing out at this point?
Freaking Scott and Lori, what the heck?
Scott and Lori, hands down. I don't know if you noticed too during the sumo thing, Scott, when he looked at Lori's little whatever doodad, he was like, yeah, good. And then he looked at Scott's, which is what Lori did. And that's the mistake. Like Scott nailed it on the first time.
Yep.
Like, I don't know what this man has done in his life, but like he has the cool, calm confidence that you need to run the race.
Yeah, he's a jack of all trades. Clearly, like anything he's ever done in his life up until this point is absolutely benefiting him on the race.
Yes. and he's bringing it with him. He's learned from it, and he's bringing it with him and utilizing it. And again, that to me is part of that mental that you don't always see. It doesn't necessarily transfer from the camera to the actual TV screen, but I love it. They definitely surprised me this leg. I was happy to see, what is it? Is it Jonathan and Anna who won this leg?
Yeah.
I was really happy to see him calm down a bit.
A different side.
Because last leg, I was like, dude, it's gonna get the best of you if you don't calm down.
Yes.
You've got to take it easy. And he was less harsh on both of them, and was able to sort of embrace it. Now, can he keep that? That's going to be, because they're a strong team, but can he keep it? Is going to sort of be the test with him.
Here's the thing with him that he's going to have to keep in check, because he is like so harsh on himself when he's running for first and second place. That's not where the pressure of the race is. Like, I've been at the front of the pack. It is super chill, super casual there. It's when you're fighting for your life at the back of the pack, clawing and scraping your way to not be last. That's where the pressure is. So, like, you got to stay calm, like, keep it chill when you're at the front of the pack, because you need that energy for when you're at the back.
Yeah. But remember his goal, like you said, the first leg, they always want to be first.
Right.
So I hear that. It doesn't matter, though.
The race. I know. It's a different way to run the race. We know how Amy and I ran the race. It's a different way.
I mean, I was at the back a lot too, but
it's a totally different way to run the race. It's not about being first all the time.
It doesn't. I won as many first place leads as Kelsey and Joey of our season, and they walked away with $1 million.
Walked away with the money, right? So,
and like Jason and Andy didn't get a first until it actually counted. So like, getting first or like breaking records, that only go so far. The goal
Yeah.
is to be one of the final 3 teams running this
Yeah.
race. So it doesn't really matter what place you get in between, as long as you're
Yeah.
there to cross the finish line at the end of the season. So
Yeah.
yeah, it will be interesting to see. And honestly, from a viewer standpoint and just entertainment, I would love to kind of see Jonathan and Anna fall to the back a little bit just to see how he will respond to that pressure. And Bill even said when he kind of gave an overview of the teams that if Jonathan's not first, he's last. So any other number to him is not good enough. It's not winning, quality. Like, it's just he needs to be first. So it was nice to see this other side of him at the pit stop. And I mean, maybe they're going to be the team to beat from this point forward. Maybe, who knows?
I mean,
But the team
Carson
to
and
U-turn
Jack,
at this
though.
point forward.
Yes, I was going to say Carson and Jack are really impressing me. And again,
Very much so.
they're gamers outside of the race. They're probably surprising themselves too. And I know Phil said too, like they're going to surprise themselves athletically. And I think Erica nailed that on the head this episode, that the race isn't all about athleticism. It's really about the strategic moves and the decision making that you make throughout the race. And I just feel like Jack and Carson are so level-headed, and they're also having a lot of fun. And sometimes teams lose sight of the fun aspect of the race is when they start making fatal mistakes. So I don't see Jack and Carson really ever making fatal mistakes just because they're having so much fun. And I loved what they said at the beginning of the episode about how they're huge nerds. They're so used to playing as heroes and defeating evil in their games. And this race is their opportunity to feel like the heroes. So I'm rooting wholeheartedly for Jack and Carson. And I really just appreciate the perspective and the energy that they're bringing.
Yep,
They're probably my favorite team.
Love seeing them. Yeah.
Of the 14, they're probably my favorite right now.
All right.
Yeah. I love seeing just the different like we're really getting into the relationships again this season, which I really like. And, them being friends and coming out to each other and all. I just love I feel like I have an emotional connection with them in a way, and with the other teams as well, like seeing the baby photos of Jeff and his dad and, them being lumberjacks together. Like, I just love that aspect of it. And so I think that as long as the team, like, to me, if you're still in it, you got a shot to win it. So,
I like
so
that.
as long
Put it
as
on the shirt.
yes, if you're in it, you got a shot to win it. So as long as the teams, I know it's already filmed, but whatever. In my head, as long as the teams can stay mentally level-headed, it does matter how strong you are, but your mental strength to me is everything. And like Bernie, like y'all gotta stay chill. Like, you gotta leave the drama in the hotel room or in the tent, wherever you gotta sleep that night, and come to the race ready to go. And
Well, you gotta
I
also
think
remember
Jeff's
your partners. Your
Yes,
partners.
yeah.
Like,
We're
stop
not against
fighting
each
with your
other.
partner. Like, you are not opponents in this game. Like, you
You're
two are
together.
a pair. You come in together, you leave together.
Yep. That's how it is. You're not, one of you isn't staying because the other one couldn't get something. You're in together or you're out, like you said. But I think that there's something with Pops and Jeff that we're not seeing yet. Pops has the wisdom. He's 60 what? 5?
I think so. Let me do a quick Google.
I think he's 65. The way he scaled that wall looked like he was 20, but yes, or whatever that thing he
Well,
scaled.
because he's got muscles for days. He has more muscles than all three of us combined.
65.
Literally 65. I think there's something there that we're just not seeing yet that's gonna shine through. I don't know what it is, and they've not been in the front, they've not been in the exact, last place. You know what I mean? So they're getting a middle edit, I guess you could say. Right now it's only like 2, but I think there's something with them that we haven't seen yet. And I think that Jeff brings that determination and eagerness that will shine eventually. But yeah, love this season so far. Great job, guys, girls, guys. Love it, love it, love it.
And I agree with you on what you're saying about Pops and Jeff. I would say the same for Courtney and Jasmine. That's a thing that I'm wanting to see more of, because they seem to work really well together.
They do.
But just with how the show works with the edits, usually if you're in the top half or the bottom half, you get more of the the edit, more of the screen time, but that's a team that I would love to see more of. But Alyssa and Josiah, they're probably one of the cutest couples we've seen on the show.
Yes, they are.
They
And
are.
at the pit stop, just that sweet moment with Josiah, and they're obviously celebrating getting third, and he like kisses her on the forehead and was like, "That was all you." Like, he just really lifts her up, and it's just really inspiring and adorable.
It's beautiful
to see.
She does the same thing back to him. Like the sumo wrestler, she's like, "This is his dream."
Yes.
He is so excited. Like,
he's so excited.
They just have these so sweet moments, and I love seeing that from people.
It's like opposite of what last season was with Amber and Vinny. Like, that is like polar
opposite.
Polar opposite.
Complete opposite. But it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I'm not saying it would have happened, but like when they're in a very stressful, when they're at the back, like what's it gonna, I hope it's still the way it is, but you know, things are different depending upon where you are in the race. As you know, you guys kind of said earlier, when you're in first, you don't need to panic. Or when you're kind of in the first, 3 or 4, you don't need to panic. If you're in the back, it's a different situation. So hopefully it'll be good, but never know.
Okay, after talking about all these teams, who again is your team of the episode?
Scott and Lori is my team of the episode. They no one can. They have to be.
Yes. Yeah. Scott and Lori for sure. I'm like still just like shook that they went from last flight, her with her sleep mask on in the airport, getting her shut eye to in place, and then Scott being able to do everything just so naturally, like so impressive. Like, it was just
Mr. MacGyver over here.
They're just like gliding through this race.
Yeah, and they're having fun with it. Like, and I'm sure their boys are so incredibly proud, like watching their parents do this. Like, but for sure, I mean, they were literally drooling in the airport and then wake up and get second. What? Like, what? Like, literally, like, you're drooling. Like, sorry, Lori, but you were drooling in the airport.
Yes.
And wake up, come through. Scott came through. Bernie came through. And they run and they get second. But the attention to detail is going to help them in this race as well. You can already
100%.
see it. It's totally going to help them. So, yeah.
Also, kudos to the editors for giving us that journey, right?
Yes. Honorable mention, though, for me has to go to Mark and Brett. And the only reason why I'm saying that is the way that they were able to bounce back from that roadblock, support each other. I mean, Brett clearly was the strength Mark needed at that roadblock, the way that he supported him and showed up to support him. And Mark just handling everything with grace and with poise and really trying to find ways to support Ernest. Like, that was a hard situation that I think any other team would have been in. It probably would have had fireworks. There would have been a little bit of tension or drama, but just the patience Mark exuded during that, like, doesn't go unnoticed. And I think that level of patience is so important on The Amazing Race. And that's why they were able to like continue to fight their way through this leg.
Yeah. Agreed.
Well, next week on The Amazing Race, I clipped the preview for next time. It's chaotic, crazy. That's what we're used to, is what the episodes is called. The stakes are high at the roadblock. Racers must play ancient Japanese game of Kamari, and the first team with both members to successfully complete the game will win the Express Pass. So we'll see the Express Pass making a comeback in next week's episode. Cannot wait to see who gets the Express Pass, but also how that comes into play on this season of surprises. Well, that wraps up our recap. I mean, this was fun. It was so good to see both of
This was a blast.
Ditto.
You're always welcome anytime. James Earl, where can everyone find you on social media if they wanted to keep up with you?
Oh, I am on Instagram, I think only, and it's J.E. Corley, but it's real boring.
Well, okay. What about you, Maya?
You can find me at maya.warren. It's a lot of ice cream because everyone knows I love ice cream, and a bit of travel because I still travel a lot, as I said earlier. And you can go to my website at drmayawarren.com. So, yeah.
Love it. Thanks again for joining y'all to recap this episode. We'll be back again next week. Cayla will be here. It is her birthday during next week's recap. And we also have Haley and Kaylin from my season joining us to talk about episode 3. So we'll see y'all next week, and thanks for watching. Bye, everyone.